and the Fired Up Podcast Network, and he was my running mate for 2.5 days of Senior Bowl practices. He's my good buddy, Brian Lamb. Brian, man, nice to have you on the Draft Countdown podcast finally.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right, so we're going to get right into it. Me and Shane talked a lot about it last week or last Friday. So let's get your take on this Carolina coming up to Chicago's spot at 1. Carolina goes 9-1, and you know the package by now. So who are they coming up to get, and do you like the value of the trade?
I love the value of the trade. I mean, especially for Chicago, right? Maybe 9's a little bit further down than I would want to move, but I think you can still get a good player, especially, if Jalen Carter's there. He today, so there were some concerns, so he might be available. You're probably going to have 4 quarterbacks off the board right off the bat. So you're going to have, your pick of some really good defensive players there. I think trading out of that pick has always made the most sense for Chicago. Now that you get DJ Moore and they've been very active in free agency, I think that they can kind of narrow down what they want to do and get a plan and execute it. For Carolina, I mean, at this point, they've got to know who they're targeting, right? Like you have to have your mind made up. I think it's going to be a slow rebuild for them, especially giving up that much to move up. And you look at that team and there's a lot of holes, everywhere in that roster. And now it's going to take a lot longer to fill those holes when you have less draft capital. So, I think it made sense for both sides. But I think that she winner in that trade.
Well, Brian, you kind of mentioned it. I want us to have a conversation about it. Today was Georgia's pro day, and Jalen Carter was the talk of the pro day. Obviously has had the off-field issues, the misdemeanor charges while he was at the combine, but came into the pro day 9 pounds heavier than he was at the combine. And watching him go through this pro day, cut it short. He was clearly out of breath, like he was not in shape to go through this. What does this tell you? Does it do anything to his draft stock? And B, kind of general thoughts about him still going through this and showing this to NFL teams today.
I don't know if the 9 pounds scares me. I think you can look at Bryce Young, and he probably added 9 pounds, to get up to 194 at the combine, right? So it's not the 9 pounds that scares me. It's the, what he looked like on the field during those drills, not being able to finish. Some of that's what scares me. Maybe obviously not more than the off-field stuff, but that's what scares me as an on-field prospect. I think he's going to fall. If you would have asked 2 months ago, I would have said, he's a top 3 pick. Now I think it's probably maybe more likely, in that 9 to 15 range, somewhere in there, especially with a lot of top corners. You've got some really good edge guys there. And then your quarterbacks, obviously. I think it just kind of makes sense that he's going to move down that board a little bit.
Brian, you live right there in Houston, so I feel like you've got to be plugged into the local talk and everything there. What's the fan base there in Houston? Which of the quarterbacks do they want, and which one do you think they ultimately get? Assuming that it's going to be a quarterback, and I think we all do.
Yeah, I think it'll be a quarterback for sure. There's a lot of talk on Bryce Young. I don't know if I would necessarily pick him there for, as a franchise quarterback. It's a lot to invest in a guy that's 194, and probably not his natural playing weight, right? But I mean, winning that last game against Indianapolis and losing that first pick kind of puts you in a hole. So I really think it kind of depends on who's off the board first. But if you ask me to make a decision right now, I would probably go with Anthony Richardson. Maybe it might take a little bit for him to get up to where his ceiling's at. But I think you can maybe draw some comparisons to Jalen Hurts on that, where give it a year, 2 years, be patient with him, bring the offense along, and you'll really start to kind of see the type of player he is.
Well, let me follow up with that. Give me kind of your rankings of those top 4 quarterbacks for you, not necessarily for a specific team or fit or need. What's your grades kind of come out to? How do you order them? Because it seems like it's wildly different from person to person.
Yeah, I mean, it's been wildly different for me too. I mean, starting, for most of this process, it's been CJ Stroud at the top, Bryce Young right behind him, and then Richardson. Going back and watching film and really breaking down the film and kind of, diving into it. I still have Stroud a little bit above Bryce Young, but, I really like what I see out of Anthony Richardson. There's not a lot of, playing history in at the collegiate level. But I still think that there's a really high upside. And when you kind of break it down, I think that he's at the top, and obviously I think that at this point Will Levis has kind of started to fall down a lot of boards, including mine.
In the history of first round picks at quarterback, as far as you can go back, how many of them have lost to Vanderbilt?
Good question. I don't know.
Shane, one of us has got to research this before the draft.
Yeah, look, I'm going to start going down the line here. Let's find out.
I mean, it had to be when Cutler was there, right? I mean, that would make sense
or when Franklin was there as the head coach. Could be. I don't know. I'm gonna look. I will because I got to have this factoid for our live stream on night one. Sticking with the Texans division here, Indianapolis is in a bit of a conundrum now because I don't think any team got screwed more by that trade of Carolina going up than the Colts. I've pretty much put it out there that I think they just, at this point, make the offer sheet to Lamar. Just do what you got to do. Because I would rather have Lamar and give up next year's $1 and $200 million than I would to have either Will Levis or Anthony Richardson at this point.
Well, I mean, especially if you're picking 4, right? I mean, you're taking the last remaining quarterback of that top 4. And if they're there, I don't know if assuming it's Will Levis, I don't know if I'm Chris Ballard, if I'm willing to, risk my, career on a quarterback out of Kentucky that just frankly wasn't very good. Right. Whereas maybe, you address another need and do you target Hendon Hooker in whether that's the back end of the first round or early second round, or, look at one of these 2024 guys. I don't know if your answer is in the NFL draft. I know that they can't go back to a Band-Aid, whether that's Matt Ryan or Carson Wentz. So, having somebody like Lamar Jackson there is obviously intriguing. And yeah, I'm with you. I would throw out whatever number he wants at this point.
For the record, Will Levis also lost to Vanderbilt.
Hey, look at that. Get the 2-for-1 this year. I'm working my way back here. It's not going too great so far. So we're moving back. I mean, I think the Ravens end up matching if anyone actually offers it. It doesn't look like they will. So unfortunately, the Colts might be stuck. Brian, let me switch gears because I'm gonna need some help for my final mock draft because I don't know where to put Bijan Robinson, and I want to know how you kind of feel about him as a prospect. I have him pretty squarely as a top 10 prospect in this draft. As Brian mentioned at the top, we redid our boards. I have him at 5 actually on my big board. But with the running back position devalued, how far does he fall? I tend to think maybe he sticks to the top 10, but I don't know. Like where are potential landing spots? What do you have him? Where do you think he ends up range wise in the first round? And if you like any fits?
Yeah, he's 10th on my board. In terms of a fit, I think it's much lower than 10. Man, I just don't know. I mean,
It's hard.
It is hard. I don't think it's Philadelphia, right? I think you can rule that out. Coming back a little bit further, is it Detroit? I mean, maybe. I don't know. I tend to think that it might be a team in that 22 to 26 range that just tries to get in there and get them before anybody else has the opportunity. And at least at that point, you get the 5th-year option, right? So that's where I think he's going to come off the board. But I have him ranked much higher.
Yeah, he's 8th on my board as well. I was trying to look back at first round like running backs, and it's like one that just came out of nowhere. I'm trying to figure out. I can't do it. And I think it's going to take something like that. And but for us people who are going to try to project this thing, it's not going great, is it? Because you know that because of the evaluation of the position that it's just hard to slot that in. But there's going to be a team. I'm like you. I think between 10 and 25, anywhere could happen. As I said when I was introducing you there, you were my running buddy there at the Senior Bowl this year. So I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that. As we go forward here, now that we're through all the All-Star circuit, we're into pro days now, we're through the combine. What stood out to you at the Senior Bowl that's kind of now, as we're a month and a half removed, that's sticking in your brain now from that week?
Yeah, I procrastinate quite a bit, so I did my show prep about 4 hours ago. And, one thing that really kind of stuck out is in years past, you've kind of seen several players kind of ride that momentum wave of having a Senior Bowl, riding that into the combine and going into the draft. And it just feels like at this point, you really haven't heard of that guy that's a first-round prospect that has just crushed the whole pre-draft process and is really moving up there. Maybe Lucas Van Ness. But other than that, I mean, there just really hasn't been anybody that stood out at the Senior Bowl as somebody that I would risk my career on as a first-round prospect.
Yeah, I mentioned it after the combine. Darius Rush from South Carolina seems to be like the one guy that has just rocket launched from the Senior Bowl up, but he's not going in the first round.
Right.
So I'm with you. I don't. We do this exercise every Friday before the Senior Bowl. We try to guess how many first rounders are going to come from the game. I went low this year. I was the lowest of us all, and I think I had 4. And even then, I'm not convinced. I wasn't convinced that they would get that many. So I guess we'll see. Shane, last question for Brian. I'll leave it with you.
Yeah, so we actually had a request from the chat to talk a little Kansas City Chiefs. So I'll toss that out to you, Brian. Obviously won the Super Bowl. Viday one asking if we can get into some Chiefs. I know him and I talk on Twitter, so he's gone through the gambit here. But I think we saw Juju Smith-Schuster sign with these New England Patriots today. What do you think the Chiefs do? That they spent some big money, offensive tackle wise, in free agency. They look receiver. How I don't know, how do they kind of keep this momentum going? What do you think are some positions or players you think would be a good fit for the Chiefs themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think receiver's the safe answer, right? I mean, you look at the rest of their roster, and they've done a really good job of just building that team. Have some young talent kind of infused in there, some really good players. If it's not receiver, maybe running back. Maybe that's where Bijan Robinson can go. God forbid. Maybe offensive line, some depth there. Defensive front, maybe a defensive tackle. I don't know if there's a clear answer as to what they should do. But they just reload and just continue to have just a fantastic season.
Yeah. When I saw that basically they brought in, was the offensive tackle they brought in, they replace Orlando Brown, but it's
Juwan Taylor.
Yeah. So it's like, and he's a player going to play left tackle, I guess. And I guess they're going to go with Lucas Yang at right tackle. And I thought that might be a spot where they go is are they really sold on that guy? So I guess we'll see if that's a potential spot. But Brian, man, appreciate you coming on tonight. And said I appreciate you hanging out with me during the Senior Bowl practices. And it's always good talking to you. And glad you could finally come on the podcast with us.
Hey, listen, like you brought snacks that first day. I'm right there. I'm every year. I'll be there. Just keep bringing snacks.
keep bringing snacks. That's how Brian. That's how Brian got my friendship. So
yeah, the Senior Bowl team, Mom.
I've been called worse.
Yeah,
I've been called worse.
Yeah,
Brian, tell everybody where we can find all of your stuff.
At NFLDraftLounge.com, on Twitter at @BrianLamb_ISN, and starting up a podcast, Fired Up NFL Draft, on all the platforms, and on Twitter at Fired Up Podcasts.
Good stuff, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.
That was Brian Lamb, NFL Draft Lounge, good friend of mine, and glad he could join us here for our little show tonight. What's it out there, Shane?
No, sorry. I just want to say I'm trying to do this Vanderbilt thing. I'm back into the 90s. I'm working my way back. It's not looking great so far.
I'm not saying I'm onto something here.
I could have missed one, but it's not looking great so far.
Oh, good stuff. Good stuff from Brian. We appreciate him coming on tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
And